Alexander Hamilton was a Federalist and a very influential man. He was part of the Second Continental Congress as a delegate from New York. Although he did not play a large role in creating the Constitution, he was very influential in persuading states to ratify it. He, along with John Jay and James Madison, had created the Federalist Papers under the name Publius, which convinced many to side with the ratification of the Constitution. After its ratification and George Washington becoming the country's first president, Alexander Hamilton was elected Secretary of Treasury. Under this title, his main achievement was creating a plan for the United States to stabilize itself financially and also to shape its future. His plan consisted of mainly Federalist views, which created many controversies from politicians with more agrarian beliefs. These controversies regarding Hamilton's plan ultimately led to the creation of the Democratic-Republican Party, led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who recently changed his political views. Alexander Hamilton resigned as Secretary of Treasury in 1795, but he remained extremely influential to President Washington's and the Federalist Party's political decisions. Alexander Hamilton, being a clever man, knew that in order to truly get his point across in his letter, he would need to direct it to a well-respected and educated Federalist. That is why he chose to send his letter to William Loughton Smith, a respected member of the House of Representatives from South Carolina. William Loughton Smith, in April of 1789, became the United States representative of the Charleston District in South Carolina. Soon after the first congressional recess, William Smith was invited to join President Washington on his tour to the newly admitted state of Rhode Island. During the tour, he met many of his colleagues and built good relations with them, and also with Thomas Jefferson and George Clinton, who accompanied President Washington on his tour. Towards the end of the second congressional session, most representatives held a high regard for William Loughton Smith, who had built a reputation for being sharp and politically aware. William Smith, being committed to strict constructionism and economic interest, he supported Alexander Hamilton's financial plan and, more importantly, supported his political decisions. This made him the ideal person for Alexander Hamilton to send his letter to. Alexander Hamilton's letter was written on March 10, 1796, and consisted of his views concerning the argument made by James Madison regarding the establishment of Jay's Treaty. In 1795, both the Senate and the President had passed a vastly unpopular treaty. This was an agreement between the United States and Britain, which turned out to be less beneficial for the United States than aimed for. In Alexander Hamilton's writing to William Loughton Smith, he started off the letter by responding to the speech given by James Madison on March 7, 1796, which was in response to George Washington's refusal to give the House papers relating to Jay's Treaty. The House of Representatives, motioned by Edward Livingston, demanded to see these papers because they believed the treaty was abominable and gave far too much authority to the British. George Washington responded by saying that the House of Representatives, under the Constitution, had no authority over creating and establishing treaties with foreign nations. James Madison argued that the power bestowed to the Senate and to the President to create and establish treaties superseded the power of the House, as it was their duty to be deliberate in their actions and not executive in a manner in which they could not voice their opinions. Alexander Hamilton deemed this statement false, writing that there were clearly stated examples in the Constitution of situations where the House of Representatives did not have the authority to be deliberate. Alexander Hamilton acknowledged the fact that the House of Representatives had the authority to be deliberate, and in being deliberate came discretion. However, he argued that under the Constitution, there were specific scenarios of where the House of Representatives did not have the freedom to be deliberate and did not have authority to argue against executive decision. In his letter, Alexander Hamilton brought up one such restriction where in the Constitution it said that there would be fixed salaries for judges and their pay should not be diminished no matter what the circumstances may be. This restriction preventing the House of Representatives from making provisions to judges' salaries or deciding whether to appropriate and pay their salaries at all abridges their power to be deliberate. Hamilton used this example of a restriction on the House of Representatives' power to draw William Smith's attention to his next and more relevant stance in his letter. Alexander Hamilton brings up the power given to the President and the Senate in Section 2, Article 2 of the Constitution, for creating and establishing treaties between the United States and foreign nations. This power acts as a restriction on the House of Representatives by abridging their authority to be part of constructing and ratifying treaties. James Madison, on March 10, 1796, before Hamilton wrote this letter, spoke in Congress about a flaw in the Constitution, giving the Senate and President the power to be deliberate over treaties and not the House of Representatives. Reacting to his speech, Alexander Hamilton brought up the fact that the House of Representatives, with no authority on being deliberate on this subject, must respect the validity of the President's and Senate's decisions. The House also must respect the validity of the Constitution and its restrictions, for they were established in order to prevent the abuse of power to keep the government balanced. Along with Alexander Hamilton stressing the importance of the constitutional restrictions on the House of Representatives, he also warned William Smith of the likely consequence in not having this system of checks and balances. If any doctrine was to be created allowing the House of Representatives to be deliberate on all subjects, it would destroy the attempt to maintain balance between federal and state legislators, and would go against the very reason the Constitution was created. In 1798, a document of such sorts was written by James Madison, and is known as the Virginia Resolution. In this resolution, drafted by James Madison for the Virginia legislature, the power to nullify federal laws was given to all state legislators. Realizing that this power would go against the Constitution and cause a great imbalance in powers given to the federal and state government, other states refused to ratify this document. However, in drafting this resolution, it showed that Madison's belief as a Democratic Republican of having a stronger state government affected his decisions toward the prosperity of the nation. James Madison, before his speech on March 7, 1796, also drafted a petition on August 23, 1795, protesting Jay's Treaty, which he planned to send to the General Assembly of Virginia. Although this petition was never seen by the General Assembly, it was still an effort made by the House of Representatives under the leadership of James Madison to repeal the treaty. Alexander Hamilton, in response to James Madison's petition, wrote that a treaty between two nations abridges all discretion from the legislative branch, and that there are only three ways in which a treaty can be nullified. In respect that a treaty is established by the moral obligations of both nations, the way in which it could be nullified was by mutual consent of both sides, ill faith by one of them, or a revolution, causing the nature of the government to change. This caused James Madison's petition to be unconstitutional and therefore invalid. The letter written by Alexander Hamilton to William Loughton Smith proved to be effective, as most of his points were raised in the next congressional session. Alexander Hamilton's motivation for addressing this matter in his letter was that he truly believed the action taken by James Madison towards Jay's Treaty went against the Constitution and its restrictions on legislative power. He believed in a strong, balanced federal government and wanted to prevent James Madison from causing an imbalance of power. Besides James Madison's unconstitutional actions, Alexander Hamilton had personal reasons to write this letter. Since James Madison had openly disagreed with Jay's Treaty, Alexander Hamilton felt a need to contradict Madison in order to support his long-established friendship with John Jay. Their friendship began in 1789, when they came together in order to establish the Federalist Papers, and since then had both supported each other's decisions, such as Alexander Hamilton's financial plan. Along with this letter, Hamilton wrote a series of newspaper articles in defense of Jay's Treaty. Besides his friendship with John Jay, Alexander Hamilton also shared a personal connection with James Madison, but this was more of a rivalry than a friendship. James Madison had helped in creating the Federalist Papers, but later had changed his political beliefs and became a Democratic Republican. His change in beliefs occurred when he protested against Alexander Hamilton's financial plan for the United States, prolonging its establishment. Hamilton's support and friendly connection with James Madison ended, due to Madison's change in political beliefs. This newly formed rivalry with James Madison and his Democratic Republican views also encouraged him to write this letter to William Smith. It is not known which reason had more influence over Alexander Hamilton, but it is certain that his personal connection with John Jay and James Madison served as a huge factor in creating this letter.